Hello, everyone. I am Vengeance, and this is the second attempt at us doing this podcast because I forgot to hit record for the first 5 minutes of us recording or talking. Anyway, I am joined today by Connor Nielsen. Connor, how are you doing today? Again.
I'm doing very well, Mr. Vengeance. I'm actually laughing harder this time than I did the first time because A, I forgot you had said that the first time, and B, it was it's just hearing it all over again. It sounded so spontaneous the first time.
Yeah.
But it's the weekend. Woohoo! Yeah. I mean, at least for me it is. You're probably going to be hearing this on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. But no, I'm doing well. How are you doing, Comics Kid?
I'm doing pretty good. And as you can tell by the title and my feeble attempt at joking and tying in with a subject matter, we are talking about The Batman, a movie that came out a few months ago, earlier this year, directed by Matt Reeves, starring Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Andy Serkis. Earlier, the first time, I called all these people by fictional characters that they have played. I'm not going to do that this time. Connor, why don't you tell us a little bit about the plot of this film?
Okay, so The Batman is an interesting product because this is the latest reboot of the Batman property. The last time we had one was really the movie that sort of kickstarted the whole reboot craze to begin with. Batman Begins in 2005. And that reboot had led to a trilogy that sort of really blew the roof off of the superhero boom and is really maybe responsible for an enthusiastic interest in superhero films. But since 2012's The Dark Knight Rises, which is the third and final film in that reboot trilogy directed by Christopher Nolan and starring Christian Bale, we've had no Batman movies, live action and theatrically released anyways. There have been plenty of straight-to-video animated films. There was the Lego Batman animated film. But as far as in live action goes, there was this whole period where Batman was played by Ben Affleck. He was in Zack Snyder's Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, and Justice League. He appeared in the horrible Suicide Squad movie. But this movie, The Batman, has spent so long in what is called development hell. This started life as a solo adventure for the Ben Affleck Batman. It was going to be written and directed by Affleck. It was going to be starring Affleck. There was screen tests. There was a story pitch. There was no screenplay that ever seemed to be materialized. For about 2.5 years, Ben Affleck said they just couldn't quite crack the right story, which leads me to wonder why you would even greenlight a movie, but whatever. This is how franchise filmmaking is made in the 2010s, 2020s. So over time, it sort of morphed behind the scenes. There were shakeups. Ben Affleck didn't want to be playing Batman anymore. He was having personal problems, wanted to distance himself. Matt Reeves came in, and he was just hot off of the Planet of the Apes films that he had directed. But like Ben Affleck, he just couldn't seem to get a script done in under 2 years. And so finally, in 2022, we're finally getting The Batman. This time, it is finally seeing the light of day as we see Robert Pattinson now playing Batman, who, completely unlike Ben Affleck, this is a young Batman who, instead of in his kind of later years as a kind of more Frank Miller version, we're seeing a more Frank Miller version of Batman in the year one sense, where we're seeing Batman in his second year as a crime fighter. What is happening when we pick up is he is investigating a serial killer, the Riddler, who is leaving clues and little coded messages that Batman must decrypt and come to understand. And maybe he'll catch this criminal, but as he pulls on the Riddler's threads, he is realizing it is all connected to conspiracies, a conspiracy that involves not just the Gotham City Police Department, but also politicians, the mob, and even his family's history. And maybe he will learn more and uncover the truth about what really happened behind the murder of his parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne. It also involves Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, who works at a lounge, and you have Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin. So what did you think of this movie, Comics Kid?
I already told you earlier, but the audience listening to this hasn't heard. So once again, I'm going to paraphrase a review that your brother put on Letterboxd. As I said in another time and place, I like to haunt Letterboxd and read your reviews, Connor, and your brother's, even on stuff that I've never seen and never will see. But your brother said it is pretty cool that for the Dark Knight Rises 10th year anniversary, instead of having to marathon the whole trilogy, WB released this 3-hour remake. And I think I pretty much co-sign what he said. Some of the stuff that is common between this movie and the Nolan movies is stuff that is just part of the Batman DNA. Like when The Amazing Spider-Man came out, and there were a lot of people saying, "Oh, this is just doing a lot of the same stuff that the Sam Raimi movies were doing," and it's like, well, that's partly because they're using the same character and covering a lot of the same ground that was covered by that character in the comics. So yeah, they're gonna be doing some of the same stuff, and so I feel like that is true here. But also, there's one part where Catwoman here is trying to convince Batman, let's just leave the city. You don't have to be a hero anymore. Let's just run away together. And I was like, man, this feels like the Chris Nolan and Hathaway Catwoman. And I don't I've read enough Batman that I'm not like an expert on the Catwoman and her history, but I feel like that felt like it was more like a send off to the Nolan movies and less of a adaptation of the character from the comics. And so there were things like that where I was heavily reminded of the Nolan movies, and I like those movies. I really like Begins and Dark Knight. I liked Dark Knight Rises okay, but I was kind of wanting something new with Batman. I think what I said the first time we were talking about this was that I wanted I want to see Batman take a dip in the Lazarus Pit and then an immortal Batman in space fighting aliens. I want something really, really different than what we've gotten before. And I somewhat good-naturedly, I said that the next Batman reboot we get, the director, screenwriter is going to say that they are inspired by Year One, Killing Joke, Arkham Asylum, Long Halloween, the same stuff that has inspired all of these movies that we've gotten. And I think this movie is fine. That's going to be it sounds really harsh to just say that it's fine. I think it's fine. I don't know how many times I'm going to rewatch it. Part of that is because it's a 3-hour film, and I kind of miss the days when a movie could just be an hour and a half long and you can get in and out and then still do stuff in your day. But also there's we've also gotten to a point where there are so many Batman movies, and I think I can almost say that I like stuff about each Batman movie, at least in live action. I haven't seen all the animated stuff. There's 25 animated films I haven't seen, but at least in live action, I think I can pick something that I like from each live action Batman. So it's really hard for me, when I watch this and I enjoy it, it's hard for me to say, this is the best thing ever. Because, I can say, I think I like the Jeffrey Wright Gordon better than previous Gordons, but then there's other I'm not a big fan. I don't like the Andy Serkis Alfred as much as I like the Michael Caine Alfred. You know what I'm saying? I wish I could use my sorcery and pick and choose okay, I like this version of Batman, I like this Alfred, I like this Gordon, I like this Catwoman, and synthesize it and make my ideal Batman. But overall I think this was okay.
All right.
How about you?
So now we're about to broach completely unseen territory. Get ready. So I would say the first 10 minutes of this movie are awesome. They are this overwhelmingly immersive, very pure distillation of a certain kind of Batman. It is really leaning into Frank Miller in a way, and it's one of those things where Frank Miller, his take on Batman was so revolutionary in its time that when people think of Batman, they're thinking of Frank Miller's Batman. Even subject of parody where people, are just talking about how broody and I am vengeance. Lego Batman is just a parody of Frank Miller's Batman. And I think that in the case of something where Frank Miller as an artist is one of those people where his fixations and like kind of his style, it's become a little less popular over time because it kind of comes across as a little edgelord. But that being said, I do love Sin City. I think that The Dark Knight Returns is a great comic book. And so he very like it's obvious, like there's a reason why it struck a chord with people, right? It wasn't just because no one had ever really seen it before. There's something about the way Frank Miller used to be able to tell stories where there was something inherently kind of juvenile about the anger and the angst and whatnot, but there was a maturity about the way he aimed those feelings that made it. I'm able to connect with that rage, the sexual frustration, the political, just kind of almost incoherent anger at politics. Like there's a lot of that there that's able to kind of stir up feelings in you as a reader. And watching the first 10 minutes of this movie, it felt like a Frank Miller, like the best of Frank Miller comic books, where it is just this, it's immersive. It is violent, but the violence feels like there's weight there. There is style for days. And this could have all looked so cringeworthy and like so self-serious to where you're laughing at it. But it steers itself in 2022. It takes some balls to steer into what would right now kind of be the skid, right? Where it's like, you don't want to do like Lego Batman made a parody of this and you're just going to straight up do this for real. And they do. And it absolutely works. And I found it to be I never thought I would get this feeling revisit or like getting a dark and gritty Batman again, but I did. And for that, it's awesome. I love it. And the rest of the movie, it's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Frank Miller because, like, the very beginning and very end of this movie have Robert Pattinson doing narration. Like, I don't remember exactly what he says, but it's something like, this city is a night worker, and I am the. You know what I'm saying? Like, it very much. I was expecting to hear the beginning is the end is the beginning, and I was expecting Robert Pattinson to say the city will look up and shout, "Save us!" and I will whisper, "No." Like all of that, like, is stuff that I think works better on the page than works when you're reading it out loud. Like, I had completely forgotten about all that. And then you get to the end and he's doing it again where he's like, now I don't represent vengeance. Now I represent hope. And I should go ahead and say I'm doing the gravelly voice kind of, but I want to praise Robert Pattinson for not doing like the rock monster voice. Like I think Batman Begins, Bale had a really good voice. Like there was like one scene where he's using the gravelly voice when he's talking to Flash, but like when he's talking to Gordon, he sounds different than when he's Bruce Wayne, but he still sounds like a human being. And then in The Dark Knight, I don't know if it was Nolan who made the choice or Bale, but suddenly it was like every time he's talking when he's Batman, he needs to sound like that. And that was where like 10 million memes were born. And then they chose to keep doing that in The Dark Knight Rises. And then like Ben Affleck, he's not doing a rock monster voice, but he does have like a computer synthesizer like altering his voice. And I kind of like that Robert Pattinson is just talking. Yes, it makes sense that Batman would want to change his voice and sound different than Bruce Wayne. But like this isn't a movie that is specifically concerned with Bruce Wayne is trying to hide his secret identity, So I was kind of glad that we have a Batman who's just talking normal and you can just understand him. But anyway, like the very beginning, the opening and closing scenes where he's like describing like this city is a hellhole and your only friend is your weapon. And fortunately, I've got a left hand and a right hand. And, I was just like, okay. And like it felt very Frank Miller, very like, grim and gritty narrations, and like that's something that I could read it in a comic book and it would just fly right by me and it wouldn't bother me a bit. And when you have characters saying those types of lines in live action, it kind of sounds silly to me. And I don't know how you feel about that, but that was a minor thing for me where I like 5 minutes into the movie, I had pretty much forgotten that because we were past the narrations. But you didn't ever watch Arrow, did you?
No, no.
Um, Arrow, the first like couple of episodes, I'm specifically remembering the first episode. Oliver Queen is doing a lot of like narration because at that point in the show, nobody knows who he is, and then like over the course of the series, you have like Team Arrow where people know his identity, and then Ollie can just talk to these people and they can say like, "Oh, that's the Clock King. He did this one thing." But like when Ollie is the only person who knows his own identity, like you have to have him saying like, I was on an island and then I came to the city and the city needs my, and so, and I don't know, like it reminded me of that, and not in a good way.
Okay. To me, it just sort of felt like a bookend. And because we get it at the beginning, we get it at the end. I don't know. It was fine with me. They came up with an in-universe reasoning for why there is one, because he journals, and why does he journal? Because the Knights bleed together, and Frank Miller reasonings. But like, I don't know. Like, I've heard that the voiceover is a choice that doesn't click with some people. For me, like I guess it clicked with me. It's not like a choice that I thought was like the coolest thing ever, but I just, when it came up, I'm like, okay, we're doing the inner monologue thing that's in literally every Batman comic book that's been published for the last 40 years. Okay. That's something we've never done in one of these movies before. Okay, cool. I don't know. Like, to me, like it's almost like Luke Skywalker or Mark Hamill's acting in Star Wars, where some people just don't like it. And to me, I don't know. It's just Mark Hamill in Star Wars. Like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, that's fair. So I don't really have. I didn't take any notes for this. Is there a direction you wanted to go with this?
Yeah. I wanted to just kind of quickly say, as far as like problems I have with this movie, my thing is that I guess there's like a couple of places I could go. When it comes to this movie, I feel like I came to an understanding while I was watching it, just kind of about what my preferences are. So I'll just kind of be upfront about this, even though we're like 20 minutes into this. A lot of my problems with this movie are a matter of just taste. So like kind of what you were just saying about how like the voiceover narration just didn't really work for you. And I'm like, I guess it kind of worked for me. I mean, I didn't even really give it much thought, to be honest. A lot of the complaints I'll probably have are things you'll probably say I never really give that much thought. You know what I mean? Like, like, so I guess this is all just kind of a front to say, I came to an understanding about what I like, not just in comic book movies, but just comic books, period. So this movie, I feel like when Matt Reeves is making it, he's trying to make the Batman movie that just sort of collectively exists in everyone's head, but hasn't really been made yet. He's wanting to make the boilerplate Batman movie, because we've never really gotten to that before. When you have Batman, I feel like when you have a IP or some kind of cultural icon like Batman that has been around for so long, it's sort of accumulated all this mythology around it and all these different incarnations and interpretations. You have Batmobile, Batcave, mobsters, GCPD and Gordon, Catwoman, Bat Signal, etc. Right? You just have like all this stuff that's Batman. He beats people up, and he's a detective, and he has a butler, and he's a rich guy. Like, you know what I mean? And there's like giant skyscrapers. There's like all of these things, both in the like visual nature, in just sort of the story nature, in just the character. Like, there's a lot of things. And what I've kind of come to realize, and I really realized it when I was watching this movie, I like it when a person comes in and they have a take on the material, where their take is like, you can tell something about the storyteller based on those elements that they want to kind of lean into. I like knowing more. I'm like, okay, Christopher Nolan clearly likes the high-tech stuff of Batman, and he likes the world kind of globe-trotting James Bond aspect of Batman from like the Denny O'Neil sort of stuff, where we might think of, The Dark Knight as like this, Michael Mann crime movie, and it is, but he's going to China, Hong Kong to go, get somebody. In Dark Knight Rises, he has to be dumped into a pit halfway around the world. In Batman Begins, he's traveling around the world to become Batman. You know what I mean? Like there is a globetrotting element to the Nolan films that is just nowhere else. Mm-hmm. And even something like Zack Snyder, even though I don't really like it, he does have, he's obviously, interested in similar things that Nolan's interested in, but there are different things. He likes Robin being dead. He likes the older savage Batman, whereas someone like Tim Burton is really into the out of time 40s gothic industrial type things that comes with Batman. I don't feel like Matt Reeves really has a take on Batman. And that's not an insult. I think that's by design. That's not to say there are not kind of unique identifiers to his version of Batman. But I feel like what he's trying to do is he's trying, how I said there's like all of these different things that make up Batman. He wants to do all of it. You know what I mean? And I think that's commendable. It's ambitious. It's cool. He kind of wants to put the material ahead of his artistic ambitions, where he see, like, you know what I mean? It's almost like a humble take on Batman. But I think the consequence of that is he wants to do quantity and quality. What we get is a Batman movie that kind of does as much of Batman as we can possibly do in one movie. But everything about this movie I've seen done better in other Batman movies. I think the world building is better in Tim Burton's films. I think as a character study, Batman Begins is better. I think The Dark Knight is a better crime movie. I think as far as a big, giant 3-hour bombastic, or like a 3-hour epic movie, Dark Knight Rises brings the bombast in a much more entertaining and, well, epic way. Like, as far as like a historical kind of Hollywood classic epic or something. And so, like, I don't know. I like the car chase in this movie. It wouldn't make my top 3 Batmobile car chases. I think the Riddler is a neat idea for a villain. I think the Joker did kind of a very similar thing much better in Dark Knight. I don't know. Like, I like Gary Oldman and Michael Caine as Jim Gordon and Alfred, respectively, more in the Nolan films. Like, I don't know. Like, I like, you know what I mean? But it's like, you could say like all those things I'm preferring in other movies. Yeah, but I do like this Alfred more than the Tim Burton Alfred. I do think the world building aspect is better here than it was in the Nolan films, because Gotham City is just like Chicago. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, so there's obviously give and take, but it's like, if you're looking at it, this is like the most, like, on average, every element here is the most Batman-y, authentic to like the source material. But if you're looking at those averages, it's not the highest in any regard. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it in terms of like why I don't love this movie, because it doesn't do any one thing exceptionally.
Okay. Yeah. I think I agree with you. Because when you were saying that Matt Reeves doesn't really have a take, and I was thinking, like, I jokingly mentioned how, like, the next reboot, they're going to be inspired by, like, Year One, The Long Halloween. And, like, this movie, there's a whole lot of, like, it is a news story. It's not like they're adapting anything specifically, but this did feel like you take those same 5 Batman stories everyone mentions and, like, take bits and pieces of them and throw them in a blender and then, like, serve it to the audience. Like, I don't want to make that sound mean, but it really, like, there are certain moments, especially like when Selina scratches Falcone's face. I may pronounce it Falcone or Falcone, because I know sometimes, like, in Gotham they pronounce it differently than they do in Begins. And I just watched half of this movie today and half of it yesterday, and I can't remember how they pronounce it in this movie. But when Catwoman scratches his face, I was like, oh yeah, the Roman, he's got like scratches on his face in The Long Halloween. Like, okay, that's right out of that. And so, like, I don't know if I would not have been able to have put that into the words that you put it into. And also, like, I have seen the Apes movies. I've seen Cloverfield. but I don't know if I would say I am familiar with Matt Reeves's style. Like you had said, there was another podcast you and I did, and I don't remember which one it was, where you were talking about how like it was when we talked about the Rise of Skywalker, and you said like Christopher Nolan has like his subject matter that he likes to hit on, and you can kind of see it when you watch a lot of his movies. And then you were saying like J.J. Abrams, you don't really know what his subject matter is. I feel the same way about Matt Reeves. Now I like Matt Reeves' movies about 10,000 times more than I like J.J. Abrams' movies, but I don't know what Matt Reeves's thing is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would say that I would agree with you. He does not. He's not like. I don't know. Like I think he is a very talented filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
He is sort of like, I don't know. He's like a step. He's like somewhere in between a Joel Schumacher and a Quentin Tarantino. Like Quentin Tarantino gets to write and direct, and he only does the movies he wants to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know when you're watching a Quentin Tarantino movie. Whereas Joel Schumacher is, even though everyone knows him for making the Batman movies, he made The Lost Boys. He has like some movies under his belt. Like he's like, even like in the movies I don't like that he's made, he's not a talentless filmmaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's not the, it's not even like so much that he's not an auteur. Like obviously he's not, but like Joel Schumacher, I get the sense that he approaches filmmaking from a different perspective. I get the feeling he likes movies, but he'll just make whatever movie that's kind of given to him, right? Like it's a job.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for someone like Quentin Tarantino, it is this great passion. That he doesn't want a blip. He doesn't want a gray smudge on his filmography, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Matt Reeves, like when I think about it, I don't really know what makes a Matt Reeves movie. But while I'm watching one of his movies, he does approach filmmaking in a consistent way. He likes his shallow depth of field. He likes his more kind of muted color palettes. And he has a very kind of slower burn pace to his films. And he does sort of seem to be looking for the dramatic, thematic through line in his work. That being said, what I just said about him, I could say about 100 other filmmakers. It's just one of those things where he is a very good director, and I look forward to watching a movie whenever he's making it. But he is not in that upper echelon of filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
I think comparing him to J.J. Abrams is probably apt because they entered the industry together. They made like the TV show Felicity together. They were both. There's that they were both interns for Steven Spielberg together. Like they grew up they came up in the industry together. They're buddies. Like they co-founded Bad Robot together. And that's why I said, you were talking about Rise of Skywalker's discussion we had. That's why I feel like he should have made Rise of Skywalker. Is like he has more integrity than someone like J.J. Abrams, but he's not going to come up with his own awesome property. You give him an IP, and he comes up with a cool way of interpreting that IP.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's kind of where I would kind of fall on Matt Reeves.
Yeah, that sounds appropriate, at least now. Now, maybe in 5 to 10 years, he may do his own thing. But at the moment, the things I know him for are existing things. Well, Cloverfield, I guess J.J. Abrams kind of handed him Cloverfield. I don't know the full backstory on that. Matt Reeves did Cloverfield, right? The first one?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And he after doing Cloverfield, he did a remake called Let Me In. And then he does the Apes movies, and then he does a Batman movie. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I had forgotten about Let Me In. So I guess I can't remember if I said this we had only gotten about 10 minutes in when I realized I hadn't hit record, but I think I mentioned it then, or I mentioned it in this round. But as far as like individual things, I think I really, really like Robert Pattinson as Batman. Way back, it feels like an eternity ago. It was about 4 years ago when they announced this, that he was going to be Batman. Like I remember where I was. It's like when a national tragedy happens and everyone's like, I remember where I was. Like, I remember like talking with people that I used to work with and being like, "So, what are you guys thinking?" They're all like, "I don't know about this." And I mean, that's how it is when just about anyone in a comic book movie, like especially these like iconic characters. Like the next person who gets cast as Wolverine, you're gonna have two types of people. You're gonna have the people who are gonna say, "I don't like it," and then you're gonna have the people who, even though no one has ever heard of this actor, they're gonna say, "I've always been a fan of so and so," and it's like, no, you haven't. You didn't know who they were 3 minutes ago. But anyway, I like not to pat myself on the back, but I was one of the people saying, let's give him a chance. I've never seen Twilight. I don't know how bad those movies are. Everyone still likes to harp on those movies. I was getting so sick and tired of hearing people give those movies crap, not because I enjoy them, because I've never seen them. I've never read the books. I was just like, can't we like pick a new target to bully? But I was really into Robert Pattinson's Batman. I can't remember if I've said this already. I like that he's not doing the growl here. I wasn't a big fan of Andy Serkis's Alfred. I think my favorite Alfred is Michael Caine. Even though, I mean, he doesn't, air quotes, look like Alfred from the comics. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with him looking like Michael Caine. I think Michael Caine gets more to chew on than Andy Serkis. This movie is like 300 hours long, and Andy Serkis has like 3 scenes. Like I was kind of shocked how little Andy Serkis is in this movie. He's fine in what he does, but the whole time I was like, oh, there's Andy Serkis talking to Batman. I never felt like, oh, there's Alfred talking to Batman. I like Jeffrey Wright quite a bit, and he's in it more than Andy Serkis is, I think. But and I really liked Gary Oldman. There are a few scenes in the Dark Knight trilogy that I kind of laugh at a little bit. Like, it's hard for me to describe, but there are times where it feels like Gary Oldman's Gordon is like right on the edge of panic. Like, and like it's hard to describe, but like there's one part. Admittedly, it's a pretty scary, stressful situation. But like when they're carrying Rachel out of the building after she's been gassed by the Scarecrow, and Gordon's like, "What do we do?" and then he's like, "I got my car," and he's like, "Your car?" And like I don't know, like and like at the end of the Dark Knight,
he starts hyperventilating and
yeah,
I'm going into shock.
Like at the end of the Dark Knight, he's like, he's killed 7 people, 2 of them are cops, and I've made fun of that before because like when you look at everyone Two-Face killed, it's like, wait a minute, he didn't kill any cops. Like, hold on a second, but anyway, yeah, I like Gary Oldman, especially it's kind of like I have said before, like I gave The Force Awakens, even when we're not talking about Star Wars, I can't help but kick it when it's down, but I gave The Force Awakens a little bit of a pass when it came out because I was like, well, it's better than the prequels. And I think for me, I still really like the Nolan Batman movies, but I think like with Gary Oldman, I was like, well, and no disrespect meant to Pat Hingle, but I was like, he's better than Pat Hingle. But now I'm like, okay, I like Jeffrey Wright better than Gary Oldman. Like, and I don't dislike Gary Oldman's performance. I just think I like Jeffrey Wright a little bit better.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. I think Jeffrey Wright is awesome as Gordon. But just for me, like, I don't know, Gary Oldman sort of became to me what Kevin Conroy is as the voice of Batman to so many people. Like when I read a comic book, I just hear Gary Oldman's panicked Chicago accent. You know what I mean? Like I don't know, that to me he is iconic in that role. Like I cannot unsee him. But Jeffrey Wright's great. Like from the moment they announced Jeffrey Wright, I was like, oh yeah, that's who you get. Like that makes a lot of sense to me.
I saw somebody as soon as he was announced. Oh, I'm gonna have to Google this actress so I can make sure I get her. Yeah, I saw someone as soon as he was announced. They're like, no, they need to cast Annette Bening because like when you look at Annette Bening like now, she like there was especially, and I won't be able to find a picture, but it was a picture of her. She's got like the short kind of blondish gray hair and the glasses, and I was like, oh, she looks like Barbara Gordon from Batman Beyond. And I was like, that'd be killer if they could get her as Gordon in like a Batman Beyond movie. But yeah,
or Commissioner Yindel from Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, that'd be good too because she's also like, especially when she was younger, she had like a darker, almost reddish hair. So yeah, that'd be yeah, I'd be on board with that.
Yeah, I think Robert Pattinson is great. And what I think works in this movie is that it's neat because so I really like Robert Pattinson. And I don't know, like I think I always have. I never watched the Twilight movies until like a year or 2 years ago, and then I watched all of them. And let me just say, there's a reason why Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart are the only people to have careers after those movies. Like, those aren't good movies. I think the first one's definitely the best. It's bad, but it's not that bad. The sequels are really bad. But I don't know, like, there's something about Robert Pattinson as a performer where he takes the material very seriously, even when the material is Twilight. And I think that makes it very easy to pick on him because he's committing to it. And when you watch the other movies he's in, he's like always great. I think he's really good in Tenet. I mean, the Safdie brothers gave him the spotlight with a movie called Good Time, where he's excellent in it. He plays the worst person in the universe, but he's great in that movie. And so when they cast him as Batman, I actually really like the idea. I don't know if I don't think you and I have ever really talked Batman that much, but I know a lot about Batman. I guess I have a lot of opinions on Batman. Like, Batman is one of those characters from a very early age where I've always just gravitated towards, like, the earliest, like, it's not just one of the first movies. The first movie I can ever recall watching is the 60s Batman movie with Adam West.
Nice.
So, like, I've always liked that version of the character. I've always thought the animated series was awesome. I think everyone does. But so it's like, I don't know, like, to me, like, you can do so much with Batman, and I welcome all of it. And I do sort of have a Morrisonian thought about Batman, where it's like you have kind of the 50s barrel-chested Batman, you have the Frank Miller elderly, like, hulking Batman, but then you have the sort of Darwin Cook, very lean, ninja-like Batman, and I feel like you can do all of it, right? Like, and in my head, and I was talking about this with Rasco, he articulated it this way, and I agree with him, where when Batman's younger, he should be like very lean and slender and like a ninja, and as he gets older, he kind of thickens up, becomes more, puts on more muscle mass, and kind of becomes more bulky. So, like, when he gets a Robin and when he gets older, he does start becoming that barrel-chested 50s Batman, and then by the time he gets older, he's this jacked, hulking, kind of more bruiser Batman, because he knows he's not young and agile enough to be a ninja anymore. So I feel like, and so when they cast Robert Pattinson, he's so slender and lean. I liked that. I thought that was cool, and he's not as much of a ninja in this as I would have liked. They're kind of going for more of the Earth One incarnation, where I think Alfred trained him, because Alfred has a military background. I think that what's cool about Pattinson's performance is that he's in the bat suit for like 80% of his scenes. And he's in like almost every scene of this movie. Like, that's awesome. Like, usually actors will, want to get FaceTime, right? Like, we're a far cry from Topher Grace Venom, where he's taking his face out every 4 seconds. And in this movie, like, Robert Pattinson has no ego. Like, he just wants to be in the mask the whole time. And I actually think that, we can get into this, but, a little later, but I think what the story's about is essentially kind of about that. And I like that.
Let's be honest. If I was Batman, I would probably ask the director, "Can I pay you money to just let me be in the cowl? Like, I don't want them to see my face. I just want to be Batman. Like, I can see where props to Robert Pattinson. Yeah. And yeah, I was thinking about how, like, oh man, those Fantastic Four movies that we watched, where it's like, it takes till the very last scene of the movie for Doctor Doom to have his mask on. And then in a sequel, it's like, oh boy, can't wait to get this mask off and be Julian McMahon again. And it's like, oh, come on, I just want Dr. Doom. And like, you're like Tobey Maguire, like in each movie, he has to take his mask off. And it's just like, man, you're right. I like seeing Batman just be Batman. So I'm trying to think of a direction to go here. Do you want to talk about the Riddler?
Actually, if you don't mind, if we're still on Robert Pattinson, I kind of wanted to mention that I like that. Basically, so I've heard complaints about this movie that this is the Batman movie that hates Batman, like the concept of Batman. And I just want to say I disagree with that. I'm on team I disagree with that. What I think what we have here is it's a story about Batman learning the importance of Bruce Wayne. And so like people, I remember when this movie was coming out, I was looking at reviews more than I usually do. And I heard some people talking about how they like Robert Pattinson as Batman. They're not sure if they are on board with his Bruce Wayne. And I would submit that in this movie, there really isn't a Bruce Wayne. He's allowed that part of his identity to just sort of become this cipher. He's this like obsolete figure that is away from society and nobody really takes note of. And even when he shows up to a funeral as Bruce Wayne, he's still behaving like Batman, where he's walking and then stopping and like surveying and looking for clues, sweeping for clues. Like he's not really present as Bruce Wayne. And there have been consequences for that. You know, he like the legacy of his family is sort of represented in this renewal act, right? Or this renewal fund that was started when his father was trying to get into politics. And because he wasn't there as Bruce Wayne to take care of his family's legacy, that kind of got taken advantage of and taken over by corruption. And so now his family's name is synonymous with this corrupt husk. And if he did allow himself to be Bruce Wayne, he could have taken care of that a long time ago. And I don't think this movie's about like Bruce Wayne could solve all of society's problems. There's no use for Batman. It's saying that in order to be Batman, you need to be Bruce Wayne and Batman. And I feel like this is just sort of kind of about him learning the importance of that. And so that's what I think that's what kind of gives this movie its story. And I think Pattinson delivers that in a very compelling and subtle way.
I will say I will agree with part of what you said. I like that this is a Bruce Wayne that's not yet developed. In Begins, like Alfred, one of the first things Alfred in helping him build the Batman persona is Bruce Wayne needs to go out and buy hotels and, you know, go skinny dipping with European models and like basically throw off suspicion that he is Batman. And like, you know, if Bruce Wayne comes back to Gotham and 10 seconds later Batman shows up, people are going to talk. And so you have to make them not talk. And so since this movie just opens with him already a Batman and we don't even know if this Batman did any world traveling or not, then it's not like, I think I'm okay with the idea that maybe in the next movie, Alfred is going to help Bruce build a secret identity. And so I didn't mind that he's still in the early stages of building the Batman. I'm okay with that. I did get a little bit of the why doesn't Bruce just use his money to fix Gotham? Especially like when Bruce is at the funeral and the woman who eventually becomes mayor like comes up and accosts him and is like, how dare you not fix the city? I've been trying to get in touch with you. When I become mayor, you're gonna fix the city. And it was like, oh, okay. I thought that was your job as mayor to fix the city. Like, why are you saying that it's Bruce's job? And like I've always kind of hated the why doesn't Bruce just use his wealth? Because like I have read stories where Bruce Wayne does use his wealth in addition to being Batman. And I kind of like the idea that Gotham is so screwed up that if Bruce just was Bruce Wayne, it would not fix all the problems. And if he just punched criminals in the face, that would not fix all the problems. But the thing is, a billionaire enforcing social programs is really boring, and I don't want to watch a movie about that. And so I want to watch a movie about Batman punching villains in the face. And so like,
well, I feel like the movie's on your side though about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just that one scene that I thought was weird, where the mayor just comes up and is just like, "Why aren't you doing more to help the city, Bruce?" And like she actually says, "When I become mayor, that's going to change." It's like, what do you mean? Like, are you going to like put martial law on the Bruce Wayne like foundation and just like steal his money for the city? Like, but yeah, I did like the like I think you and I, we're both fans of Red Letter Media, and I didn't watch Jack Packard's review that he did with I believe The Escapist, but I saw some people on Reddit were saying that he was not as big of a fan of this movie as he wanted to be, and he said something to the effect of he wants to watch a Batman movie where Batman is good at being Batman, and I I did not need a hyper competent Batman. Now if we get like 3 movies into this universe and Bruce is still making like mistakes that he made in this movie, that would be a little weird. Like you mentioned Batman Earth One by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, and that movie had like just about, or I'm sorry, that book had just about every time Bruce becomes Batman, he does something that you would expect like you or me to do. If I put on a Batman costume and I tried like jumping off a building with a grappling hook, that Batman makes mistakes that I would make. And then like even in year one where Bruce is more competent than he is in Earth One, there's still like that scene on the fire escape where he's like, man, this is harder than I thought. Like, and he's like, trying to catch his breath. And like, I don't need a Batman who like is trained, like he's prepared for literally every eventuality. And like, he's, trained, like he did like 100 years to learn how to pick locks and then 100 years to learn how to, untie ropes, do knots and stuff. I don't need a Batman who's that competent. So I kind of liked, for example, when he jumps off the building and he has like the sort of like wings that are helping him do a controlled dive. And then you think, okay, he's going to like land on that bus. And then the parachute deploys and he like hits the ground like 6 or 7 times. And I'm laughing and I'm also like wincing every time he does it. And I'm thinking, okay, that makes sense. Like, if it doesn't matter how prepared you are or how many years of training he did. Like in year one, I think they say that he left Gotham when he was 12 and he comes back when he's 25. So it doesn't matter if you've done 13 years of world traveling with like the masters of their craft. It doesn't matter. You're still going to mess up. There's still going to be stuff like that happens. And for this being such a young Batman, I was on board with that. But if we get to like a movie like 5 to 7 years from now, that's like, if this is The Batman, then the sequel is The Batman Returns and then The Batman Forever. Like in The Batman Forever, I don't want to see Bruce falling off a building and skipping like a stone in the ocean. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, and I get that. And I don't know, like the idea that, Batman is bad at being Batman in this, I don't know. Like, I feel like he's doing a good job at solving puzzles and solving riddles and, doing Batman-y things. But obviously people keep getting away, people keep dying. And I don't know, I feel like I know this is not what the people with that criticism are saying, but I feel like if you kind of if you allow Batman to just be so good at being Batman that the movie would be over in 5 minutes, then I don't know, like I'm cool with Batman, something slipping his eye. Right. And I feel like they are giving Batman enough wins. He's just kind of getting countered at not every turn, but a lot of turns. And now he has to think about what he's going to do next. And I think that's totally fine with a younger Batman, like you were saying. So I think this movie has sort of like a double-edged sword with it, where the story they want to tell works for Batman and particularly a younger Batman. But I also think that there are things that even a younger Batman would be able to figure out. Like the criticism that I hear I hear a lot of people kind of throwing around that I guess I don't really have a rebuttal to it. It's like, okay, you have these pictures of these people that are seen at the Iceberg Lounge. They're all from the same perspective. So all these pictures were taken from the same location, presumably at different nights. Mm-hmm. Why doesn't Batman just figure out where those pictures were taken from as a clue? And you know what? That's a good complaint, right? Mm-hmm. I can see the Arkham video game level where you have to turn on detective mode and figure out the trajectory of like where the photos were taken from. But that being said, I do think that Batman, with this involving his parents and it hitting sort of close to home, he's rattled in a way where things are kind of slipping, and that works for a younger Batman. So, like, I don't know, I think it is a little bit of a double-edged sword, and so I'm willing to accept things like him not figuring out where the pictures are getting taken from if it means the growth he kind of goes through. And I feel like these are mistakes he won't have in in future movies. And Lord knows with how vocal Batman fans are, they'll be sure to not do them moving forward. I'm 100% sure Matt Reeves is already aware of all the complaints. People are lobbying at him. I'm pretty sure he was aware of these things because like faults like this, if you can call them faults, they're the result of opportunity cost. If you're writing a story and you want this to happen, as a writer, you are more than likely aware that, okay, if we make this decision, this, and this is the consequence of making this decision, but I am making the opportunity cost that this decision I'm making is worth this, and this potentially being detriments people have with my story.
That is a great way to explain it. A lot of times I have tried to put something in words eloquently like that, and I can't think of how to say it. But yes, cost is a great way of putting it. Like, if you need this thing to happen in the script, X, Y, and Z has to happen. And sometimes your character may look like, and you know what? I didn't even think about the camera angle thing. Because part of it, I was watching this spread out over 2 days. But also, like, I'm not a detective. And so, like, that's one thing about, like, I saw so many people in the years leading up to this movie happening saying, like, they wanted a more cerebral detective Batman. And in theory, that would be great. Except my problem is, when you are writing a detective story with a detective and someone who is the anti-detective, who is trying to not be detected, or as the case may be, wants to be detected at a certain time, as that's part of their plan, these two characters who are supposed to be brilliant are only as smart as the person writing them. And far too often, like, when you watch murder mysteries or watch, like, I told you before we started recording that I've been watching a lot of Murder, She Wrote lately. And most of the time I am not smart enough to figure out what's going on. But like, Murder, She Wrote does not play itself as, like, this is the world's greatest detective solving a mystery that nobody else can solve. And, like, you know, Batman is often called world's greatest detective. And so that means you have to have some really smart people creating those mysteries. And this is not meant to be an insult, but comic book writers and screenwriters are not the smartest people in the world. And so, like, they are creating, like, in this movie, I feel like there's a lot of, like, twists and turns in Riddler's plan of, like, wait a minute, I don't really understand that. But it's there to basically distract the audience so that we are left to think, like, man, the Riddler's really smart, isn't he? And so, like, I didn't even think about the camera angle thing, because there was a whole lot of other stuff that I was thinking about. But and I'm okay with Batman, like, making mistakes early on, and then in the future saying, like, I am now prepared because I have made mistakes, and I know that if I make mistakes, other people will die. So now I'm going to be smart about it, and maybe I'm not going to put a thumb drive in a computer that's going to play right into the villain's hands. Like, maybe I'll think of something else to do. So I'm okay with him making mistakes at this point in his career. And, like, if anyone says they don't like that, I would kindly say, well, you have the Burton Schumacher movies where you have a more fully formed Batman, and you have even the Nolan movies where, like, in Begins, he is just starting off, but he feels more like he's already kind of there in Begins, even though we're seeing the very beginning of his career there. So to me, like, if this isn't your cup of tea, then there are other flavors of tea out there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I feel like, you know, the detective angle, like, even though I mentioned that everything here I feel like has been done better before, we really haven't gotten the detective Batman movie. And I feel like when I was mentioning earlier that this is sort of the Batman movie that collectively exists in everyone's head that we've never really gotten before,
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I'm meaning is it does lean more into the detective angle. And the thing is, it's just, I guess I'll just be perfectly honest. The whole idea of Batman being the world's greatest detective, it's a little surprising to me that that's a title that's stuck around. Because even stuff that is more detective oriented Batman, it's not. It's like 20% a detective thing, right? Because then it's like you have, you know, the last 20% of all these stories where it is like punching bad guys and explosions and just traditional superhero spectacle. Open up a Batman comic, or not even just a single comic. In the last 20 years, we get, you know, 6-issue story arcs, right? But like, read a Batman story made since like Y2K, you don't get stories where he finds the bad guy and then puts them in jail, right? It's like he finds the bad guy at the end of issue 4, and the next 2 issues are punching the bad guy in explosions. And the plan was bigger than I thought. Well, like that's the way comic books are made. And honestly, like I was thinking about this the other day, where I cannot think of a harder job, like a harder writing gig than being a comic book writer. Whereas like you need to come up with not just a new story every month, but like a lot of the times like they're multi-part stories, and maybe that kind of helps you drag the story out and you're figuring it out as you're going along. But a lot of the times the best stories are the ones that are planned ahead of time, and you have to think about the nuances of the story. Like it's really hard, and you have to do this as your job for conceivably decades. So if you're like Jonathan Hickman and you have like kind of a distinct style, I'm surprised he's still like churning them out at a high level of quality. Like I would probably, if I was a comic book writer, come up with like 5 killer stories and be like, well, that's all I got, guys. I'm just going to do a different version of any one of those 5 stories over and over again. Like that's where I feel like I would be as a comic book writer. So I get why in comic books the detective thing didn't really stick around. And I feel like when it comes to writers, like being humble is a good thing. A lot of writers these days are just too humble, where they think I'm not smart enough to write a detective story, so they don't really want to. You know what I mean? And I mean I appreciate the honesty there, but the result is we don't really get detective stories anymore. So it's a little interesting to me that Detective Batman is a part of his identity that stuck around. So I don't know what I'm ultimately arriving at. I guess when we get more of a detective version of Batman here, it's cool. I like it. You know, I think where it comes down to in this movie is that this movie did not need to be 3 hours. And what's that?
I'm agreeing with you.
Oh, okay. It did not need to be 3 hours. And I think what makes it 3 hours is the detective angle. And even though I appreciate and like the detective angle here, I don't know. I don't feel like this plot that they're uncovering is nearly as convoluted as they think it is. I think this plot needed to be more convoluted. And that might be kind of a head scratcher to people, but I've been talking forever, but like, I don't know. I think that, you know, when I say this movie doesn't need to be 3 hours, I can see the pedant argument of, well, what do you cut out to make it not 3 hours?
I will tell you exactly what they can cut out. I'm gonna like a few things in this movie. I was like, you could cut these out and at least get rid of like 15 minutes. Like there's one part after Bruce is in the hospital visiting Alfred, and then he comes home and he's like pushing a table, and it's like 10 seconds of him pushing a table. And I was thinking you could cut that. Cut him pushing the table. Just start with him spray painting the floor and making his weird serial killer map where he's trying to like figure out what's going on. Just start with him spray painting the floor. There's like a 15-20 second shot of him and Catwoman kind of like racing motorcycles in the very end. Like, because she says, I'm going to go to Bloodhaven. Do you want to come? And he says, no, you know, my first love is Gotham. And then he says, Selena, take care. And again, sorry, I'm doing the gravelly voice because I'm expected, you know, that's how I think. But, and then, so it's like, you could have said, okay, and then she gets on her motorcycle and rides off. And then he kind of like stands on top of the gargoyle and does like the Jim Lee pose. And then like the signal is up in the sky and then cut. And then credits. But then we have like, you know, half a minute of them both riding in the same direction on their motorcycles. And then they part and they go separate ways. And it's like, he already, like, have you ever had that awkward moment where you tell someone bye and then you're both going in the same direction? Like,
yeah.
That's what happened here. And it's like, I get that, like, these are so minute, but like there's so much of that in this movie where I'm thinking like you could cut that, you could cut this short little part, and it all would add up to like so much of this movie. Like 2 hours and 45 minutes is still long, but it sounds so much shorter than 3 hours. And like I just think that this felt like they took all the footage they had and put it together and didn't even bother trying to like trim it down at all. And I think and probably if I had another watch of this movie, I could probably even talk about some like big plot stuff where it's like, you could cut this and you could cut this. Like, I like Colin Farrell as it's Colin Farrell, right? Not Colin
Yes.
Firth. Okay. Was that in the first round where I said that?
Anyway, I just meant in both rounds, honestly.
Okay. I like him as the Penguin. I don't know if you need him in this movie. You probably didn't have to hint that the Penguin is eventually going to replace Falcone as the next big mobster. Like a lot of like Batman clue hunting, you didn't need Penguin to say it's Law instead of L. Like I liked him, but he's in it, and I don't know if he's crucial in it.
Yes, I mean you're right, but what you're describing, I actually would not cut. Personally speaking, no, and I think this actually just points to the difference between you and I as viewers. So I'm glad this actually came up. What you're talking about, like, it's like the fat on a steak. It's like when you're pacing a story out, like having him push a table and having the, riding on motorcycles together, like that. It makes the flow of a story be more natural. And I feel like if you took that out, like there would be like a sort of choppiness to it that to use a Plinketism, you might not notice it, but your brain does, where you're like, something about this feels kind of choppy. So when I'm saying this does not need to be 3 hours, I'm not necessarily thinking about what needs to be cut. I'm actually thinking about a step back. I feel like this movie was conceived of as this big, sprawling mystery epic. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be this and that. Ellipsis, and it'll be 3 hours. Whoa, we're really picking up where Nolan left off, including runtime. So, because Dark Knight Rises was 245, we're going to go 3 hours. So what I'm saying is, if you want to, like, what they should have been doing is they should have looked at their mystery, realized this doesn't take up 3 hours of screen time, and then, you know what I mean? Like, because what I'm saying is there's like a large stretch of this movie where they get hung up on a clue. Now, I understand that in detective fiction and in mysteries, your end of act 2, like whatever, there needs to be the part where they got the clue that stumps them, right? I get that. I could not give a crap if they figured out this clue. The clue was not particularly intriguing to me. I thought that in terms of the momentum of the plot, it wasn't like there was a ticking clock where they're like, oh my God, we got to solve this riddle in 5 minutes. Otherwise, something bad is going to happen, right? They kind of get stuck on it for a few days. And I feel like there's downtime. And I get that in this downtime, that's when they want to bring the character stuff up to the forefront. I get that. But what's disappointing to me is that the big payoff for having them like be stumped on this clue for so long is, so Carmine Falcone, this mobster who's known for being, in every other version of the character, a corrupt person who has the cops and politicians in his back pocket. The big plot twist is that he's corrupt and he has the politicians and the cop in his back pocket. Oh, you needed to solve a riddle to figure that one out? What? Huh? Okay. So that's what I'm saying is this needed to be more convoluted to me. If you're going to have me if you're going to have the characters like stumped and they can't figure out what the plot or what the clue is for 3 days, and they finally figure out what it is, have the revelation be super complicated. Just do it that, or like, you know what I mean? Like if it's gonna be this kind of simple thing, like I don't know, like then don't. If it's gonna be what it is, where like Carmine Falcone, shocker, is Carmine Falcone, then don't make this movie 3 hours.
Yeah.
Have that revelation come as the midpoint, not your end of act 2. Like, and so like that's like what I mean, like in terms of why this should be shorter, because like what we got is just not filling up the story in as substantial of a way as I think they probably thought it was when they were putting the script together.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about the twist that the mobster is involved in mob stuff. I thought, I'll tell you what I thought the movie was going to do. I thought that the woman who becomes mayor was going to be a bad guy. Because early in the movie, we're seeing a debate between her and the Riddler's first victim. And I think her motto is like, this city needs a change or something like that. And then we see like posters on the wall that say renewal or something like that, or renewal is inevitable or something. And we later find out that the renewal posters were actually from the Thomas Wayne campaign from like 30 years earlier. And I have no idea what alternate universe this is where you like, I don't know. Like, I have not seen a Ronald Reagan poster on the wall on my way to work. So I don't know how these posters from the Thomas Wayne campaign are still up, but I was seeing these renewal posters and I thought that they were for the woman in her campaign. And I was thinking, oh, she's involved. She is somehow going to be over all of this. And like, especially when she approaches Bruce and says, like, you need to do more to help the city. I thought, okay, something is going to involve her. And I was actually surprised that she was innocent and was not in any way involved with this. I thought for sure that they were kind of doing the thing where like, oh, we're setting her up early and then you're going to be blown, your mind, that is, whenever you find out that she's sorry, that I don't know, like maybe I was just being like, I was trying too hard to look for a twist, but I thought for sure she was going to be somehow involved with this.
Yeah, maybe like the final act would need to play out completely differently. But what if she and the Riddler are actually colluding together?
Yeah.
You know, like maybe something like that. But obviously, the final act would need to play out completely differently if that's what's going on. So I guess, you know, you had suggested this forever ago, but do you want to talk about the Riddler? Where are you sitting at with good old Eddie Nashton?
I did not care for Paul Dano's performance, and I'm beginning to think that I just don't like Paul Dano because I did not like what was the movie? There Will Be Blood. That was another movie that felt like it was 500 years long, and he was in that. He was actually playing two characters in that. I like. There's a scene at the end of that movie where I drink your milkshake starts beating him up, and have you seen that movie?
No, please don't spoil it.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I will. Never mind. I will no more about that movie. Sorry. I thought you had seen that.
No, that is like one of the top movies on my list of shame.
Okay, yeah. Please just ignore everything I just said. I don't care for talking about the Batman. Everyone, when this movie came out, everyone was like, I saw a whole lot of people, like two friends of mine were both saying like, this is the best Batman movie that they've ever seen. And I was like, I knew that it was going to be coming to HBO Max, so I had no burning desire to go see it in theaters. So I said, I'll just wait. But I was thinking like, I don't know, guys, it's going to have to do some really crazy stuff to really win me over as like being the best Batman movie ever. And like, there were people saying like, you know, this is the best, you know, this Riddler is amazing. And like you said earlier, this is I'm getting a lot of Heath Ledger Joker vibes, except like, I don't know. I feel like this is like if Heath Ledger's Joker was like a whiny teenager. Like I don't, at the end of the movie when he is in Arkham Asylum and he's like telling why he did what he did, I was just kind of like rolling my eyes the whole time. Like, I'm surprised my eyes aren't permanently damaged. Like, because there's a part where he's like, why did it happen like this? This isn't what I wanted to happen. And I'm just like, grow up. Like, I don't know. Like, and then like for the first 3/4 of the movie, his performance consists of, good evening, Gotham, I'm going to murder him. Ho, 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 I'm doing a funny voice. And like, I don't know why he became a Frenchman in my impression just then, but
Sacre bleu!
Yeah. But like, I don't know, like I wasn't really getting anything here. And like his big like acting moment at the end is better than him doing a funny theatrical voice with a weird sex mask on in the first like 2/3 of the movie. But I wasn't impressed. I really am. I wonder if I like accidentally took stupid pills and I'm just not seeing what everyone else saw.
Well, I don't know. Like I've seen responses to Paul Dano's Riddler kind of all over the place. Honestly, I don't know if there's really a consensus on it. I think it's fine. This is kind of like the one Batman movie where like the villain isn't really the selling point of it. And I guess you could say Batman Begins, but I don't know. I think Liam Neeson rules in that movie. And sort of like when it's revealed that he's the villain, that was like one of those early, like I was like 9 when I saw that movie, but like I was like, oh, like that was the first time I was like aware of like a plot twist where something I didn't expect to happen happened, and it excited me. You know what I mean? And so as I've grown up, like looking back at Batman Begins, I do think of the villains in that movie, even though it is much more of a character study and like a Batman origin story. I do think the villains are kind of a selling point of that movie. But I would say this is the one where it's not. Um, I like the function Riddler serves in the story here, where he is leaving these threads for Bruce to pick up, and through those threads, Batman's really kind of learning about himself and his effectiveness and what he could be doing and his history. Like, and I like all that. But sorry, you were talking about you put on a funny French voice. This is completely unrelated, but I've started reading the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby Fantastic Four finally.
Okay.
Going back, I don't know if you've ever read that stuff, but
a little bit, a long time ago.
The first issue, the Mole Man is like destroying atomic plants, and at one point he's destroying a random plant in French occupied Africa, and when the atomic plant is getting sunken into the ground, you know they're French because one of them yells "Sacre bleu!" and Pierre, what is happening? It's very funny. Anyways, completely unrelated, but yeah, I don't know. In this movie, you know how I was talking about earlier, where like the first 10 minutes really just unapologetically, without winking, dives head first and commits to the Frank Miller-ness, and it absolutely pays off. I feel like they're doing the same thing with Riddler, where we're going to go full on crazy psycho guy. And maybe it's because I've seen 100 too many horrible Joker impressions online. But this is obviously not that bad. But seeing an actor just commit to being weird, psycho, crazy person, you know, like we see, like it's sort of like somebody saying it's like Matt Reeves looked at the 90s Batman movies and was like, okay, all 4 of those movies in the sequel, like in all 3 of the sequels, they're just doing Jack Nicholson impressions. And even Jack Nicholson's Joker was just kind of looking at the 60s Batman show and going, I'm going to be kooky and wacky and over the top, but in like a dark movie. You know what I mean? So it's like juxtaposed and like unexpected or whatever. And then it's like Danny DeVito is just doing Jack Nicholson. Michelle Pfeiffer is just doing Jack Nicholson. I don't get why people think that performance is amazing. It's not.
Jack Nicholson wishes. No, I'm just kidding. You said Michelle Pfeiffer was doing Jack. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
inappropriate.
Hey, Jack Nicholson probably did. Okay, so, but like Jim Carrey is just doing, like Tommy Lee Jones is just doing Jack Nicholson. Yeah, I don't know. Like, oh, I now get the joke. Wow, I'm stupid. Wow, I'm an idiot. So I feel like the idea behind this is that they're going to do one of the, like a kind of a 90s throwback thing where we're going to do one of the 90s Batman villains where they're just completely wacky, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But like we're going to kind of frame it in a sort of different way where we're actually taking the movie seriously, unlike those 90s Batman movies, where in those movies stuff just happens for an hour and a half. And then the final half an hour, they're like, well, let's pretend like it was all leading somewhere. And so I'm sorry. I think all of the sequels to the 89 Batman movies are awful. Like, they're all terrible, like equally terrible. They suck. I don't know who needs to hear that, but it's true. So
I'll even go one step further and say the 89 Batman movie is not great either. I enjoy watching all 4 of them, even Batman and Robin, which I think in retrospect, some people are now willing to say Batman and Robin is not as bad as like the internet gave it credit for 20 years. But
I'll do you one better. I think Batman and Robin is the best of those sequels.
I think. But yeah, I even think like the 89 one, there's some significant plot problems with that one that I've talked about elsewhere. But
I think people have caught up to that movie not being amazing or anything. I think it has greatness in it from a production angle, and that sort of is what swept people up, and it's a decent spectacle. I like the 89 Batman movie, but I think all of its sequels are garbage. But so we get this movie, and so I think Paul Dano's Riddler is like, when he is doing his big in prison freaky wacky scene, and like Batman's like, whoa, this guy's crazy. He's doing that with his eyes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was like, this movie is committing as hard to this as the first 10 minutes were committing to the Frank Miller'ness. It's not working as well, like at all. And so luckily, Riddler's plan is more prominent in this story than Riddler is. And I'm okay with that. I think Paul Dano as a performer, I like him a lot. I think he's like one of those actors who does care about the movies he's in. And I don't know, like Swiss Army Man's a good movie, and he's really good in it, and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think he goes for it, but I think the way they're conceiving Riddler here is just it's not as successful as I think the way he affects Batman through his plan is. I think his plan is more thoughtful and impressive and integrated better into the movie than he is as a character.
Yeah. And I guess like because I have a really bad habit of like taking character motivation and examining it and saying, does this work? And at the end of watching this movie, I realized I don't really know what motivates Riddler. And if the motivation is, well, he's just crazy, and crazy people can't be like you can't look at what they do rationally, that like, okay, because a lot of Batman's villains are mentally unhinged. But also, I feel like it could easily be a crutch for just writing a weak villain. Like most of what Riddler does in this movie, maybe I'm going to need your help kind of dissecting this. Okay, so Riddler, when he was a kid, he was in the audience when Thomas Wayne was making his campaign speech, and he was like watching young Bruce. And then like later that day, or later that week, Thomas and Martha Wayne get killed. And then everybody in the world is like, oh, poor Bruce Wayne, because he got killed. And then Eddie Nashton is mad because now everyone is paying attention to Bruce Wayne instead of the orphans that Thomas Wayne promised to help. And somehow, like, he becomes a sorcerer and learns that Bruce Wayne is Batman somehow. And then
he doesn't.
What? I'm confused. Okay, I wasn't sure if I misunderstood that, because there's the scene where he's talking to Batman, and then he starts saying like, Bruce Wayne, Bruce Wayne. Do you know what it's like to be an orphan? And so
okay. I think what's going on in that scene is Batman's in his like psycho serial killer apartment. He's looking around, and Batman starts to suspect that Riddler knows he's Batman. And then when he goes there, he's trying to like keep up the front like he doesn't know. And at first it seems like he does know, but then he doesn't. And
okay. Yeah. I guess I just completely misread that scene.
I think it's kind of a pointless thing to have in the movie. It's like, we need to add a little curl here. What's something we can add here to add some tension going into this scene where Paul Dano is gonna go, whoa! And so, what if Batman thinks that Riddler knows he's Batman? And then they don't really commit to it, so it's like, I don't know. I don't really see the point there in even adding that dynamic going in at all. But that's just
okay. Well, thank you for that, because I watched that part of the movie today, and I thought it's kind of weird because like Batman says to Gordon, this whole Batman thing may be coming to an end, and then he goes to the asylum, and then like Edward, like the way the scene is played, like I know this movie is already crazy long, and I am a big proponent of don't hold the audience's hand, kind of let them figure stuff out. Maybe this could have been a moment where like Bruce is talking to Alfred at the end and he says, man, I thought that he knew who I was, but fortunately he doesn't. Like something like that, because the way that scene played, I thought he was taunting Batman and saying like, I know who you are. And then because like Batman even turns and looks at the camera that's like recording their conversation. And so I thought, oh, what's Batman going to do? Is he going to like, use a batarang and cut the camera cord? Or is he going to like, drop an EMP that's going to like wipe the camera footage in the, I was like, and then at the end, it's like, oh, that thread is kind of dropped. So I guess I don't know. I just completely misread that scene. So sorry about that.
No, I mean, I get why you misread it. When I first watched it, I wasn't sure if I had read it correctly, but it seems like
Okay.
I did. Yeah, no, I think the Riddler's motivation is fine. So it's like he's upset that people gave attention to Bruce Wayne, not necessarily just in a, you know, media sense, but in a financial material sense, where I guess in this version of Batman, Thomas and Martha Wayne used to live in Wayne Manor, and then they moved into the city, and that's where Bruce lives, and he has lived. It's in like Wayne Tower within the city. But Wayne Manor, they actually turned into an orphanage to take in the orphans. And then after they got killed, that wasn't really taken care of. Like another kind of, I mean, Bruce couldn't have done anything about it. He was a kid.
Right.
But like the renewal didn't really take care of them because it was taken over by gangsters to just sort of use it as like a drug peddling scheme. And so I think like if you're an orphan and like you are living in a dilapidated building and then eventually you have no place to go, and it's because the Waynes were murdered, that's how it starts. And then instead of people saying, okay, now that the Waynes are dead, what are we going to do about like this whole orphanage they had? And instead they go, man, really would suck to be Bruce Wayne, wouldn't you? I think that's a decent starting place for the Riddler. And what they're doing is a much more 21st century and like honestly last 10 years sort of motivation where the Riddler is sort of like I'm just going to use internet slang. I'm sorry, people. He's kind of cut more from like the incel, like weirdo on the internet who doesn't have like real life friends and like, you know, sort of radicalized through the internet. Like they're kind of going for that sort of persona. And I think in that way,
he does open a video by saying, "Hey guys," and I saw someone on Twitter was like, "I cannot believe that they have Riddler like talking to his social media followers and says, 'Hey guys,'" and I thought, "Oh, that's a joke. Someone's making a joke about this movie." And when we got to that scene, I'm glad I wasn't drinking something because I would have like ruined my keyboard. Like I was like, "Oh, they're just doing that," like you said, they're just committing to that.
And I think that part of Riddler is fine. Like it makes sense that the weird conspiracy theory Riddler person would sort of come from that community. And you know, I think it works. I just think that once we actually get him there, he just has to explain his motivation in a wacky way. And like I get what Paul Dano's doing. He's trying to be a weird loser's idea of a crazy person, and that's just inherently cringy. The problem is when you're watching it, it doesn't kind of cross the line twice where it's cringy, but then it becomes creepy. It just kind of is cringy, I think,
yeah.
anyways. But I respect the effort, and I do think there's thought put behind it. It's not just stupid.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird to me how like the Riddler is a character like I've read a lot of Batman, but like not a lot of Riddler specific stories. You'll have your stories like Long Halloween where there's like Batman's entire rogues gallery and Riddler is there, but yeah, I know Riddler is like kind of a big part of Long Halloween and he's in Hush, but like Hush is the villain of Hush and like Riddler is kind of a secondary character. And so like you have like very few actual solo like where Riddler is the villain. And I don't like if you ask me what's Riddler's deal, I'd say like, well, making riddles, like, you know, being trying to be the smartest guy in the room. And that's just not a characterization that you could hang an entire movie on, especially not a 3-hour movie. And so they have to say, well, he's a terrorist and he's a internet terrorist and he's, you know, got social media followers and he's inciting his followers to be like him. And like, and again, that's like I mentioned earlier, like what Spencer said about this pulling from Nolan, like the Riddler, like influencing people to be like him feels very much like something that you could have seen if The Dark Knight ended in a different way, where like, you know, Batman has his followers at the beginning of The Dark Knight, and then the Joker maybe could have his, you know, like people putting on clown makeup and going and wrecking stuff like that. That felt very Nolan to me. That was another thing that felt very Nolan. And so, I don't know, like I can't. I think I've said before that I really hope the next James Bond movie just does a hard reboot and is set in the 60s and has like, Sean Connery level gadgets like pre. Which one was it where he's flying the jetpack? Was it
Thunderball.
like pre Thunderball gadgets? Like I want a 1960s period piece that's like going hard on like the 60s aesthetic. Like that's kind of what I want for a James Bond movie, and we're never going to get that.
Well, and they should get Richard Madden to play James Bond, and they actually should remake Thunderball, because that way we can get the two most beautiful women in the world and just find roles for them. Yeah, I don't know. I think Thunderball rules myself, but
yeah,
that might just be because Luciana Paluzzi and Claudine Auger are in it. So I don't know. That's just my
they did, yes.
And also it has sharks, and that's my favorite animal. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I realized watching this, and I said like, oh yeah, we have another grim and gritty Batman. It's like, year one, Long Halloween, and I realized I was like, I remembered like this was buried deep in the recesses of my brain. But after The Dark Knight came out, I saw a blogger who said he said I think he was I don't remember if he was like presenting it as like a joke news article, but he said Wes Anderson's going to be doing a Batman movie, and he was like, here's who all he's casting, and it's going to be like a remake of the 60s Batman. And then I realized watching this, I was like, that's what I want. I want a remake of the 60s Batman, and like Wes Anderson would be perfect for that.
Well, let me just tell you, Wes Anderson might not be making it, but I think this is all leading to a remake of the 60s Batman movie.
Oh man, I mean I'd be, if they did something that was tonally like, if they just had Riddler wears like the weird skin tight green costume, and like he just sends stupid riddles of like, the answer is a turkey gobbles up, or like that. I would be so on board with that. Like I
was just gonna say, I'm watching this and I'm like, all right, there's Riddler. Oh hey, there's Catwoman. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute, that's Penguin. We got 3 of them there. Maybe we should get that 4th one. And then we did, and it's the worst thing in the entire world, and it made me regret wanting that. But I do think we might be leading to a remake of a dark and gritty remake of Batman the movie.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and everyone else will like that, but I don't want dark and gritty. Like, I guess we've had so much of that. Like the Gotham TV series had some wild, goofy stuff in it, but it was also trying to hold hands with the dark, grim, and gritty stuff. And you had the Nolan movies, and they had their humor, but they were also doing the dark and grim and gritty thing. And like, we had a brief reprieve from the dark, grim, and gritty with Joel Schumacher, but like that was still set in the same world as Tim Burton. And like, I kind of just want like, and like Lego Batman was a movie that I enjoyed some of the jokes in it, but I overall didn't care for it as much as everyone else did. I kind of just want someone to do like a funny, like, you know how you were saying earlier about how like most of the Batman movies, the villain is the hook. And like, I want a movie that mostly focuses on like Batman and Robin they've been fighting crime for years, and Robin is like 17, and he's like, hey, I'm thinking of going to Bloodhaven for college, and Batman is like, you're growing up too fast. I don't want that. Alfred, what do I do? I want to hold on to my son. Like, and so like the whole movie is built around this relationship between father and son. And then like you could have like 36 villains in the movie, like the Tin-Eyed Man and Mr. Zsasz, and like, I mean, I know Mr. Zsasz is like edgelord, grim and gritty, but do like the 1960s version of Mr. Zsasz, however that works. And like, do the Clock King, and I don't know, like just have all these villains that they're fighting throughout the movie, but the actual crux of the movie is like Batman and Robin as a father-son, and my boy's growing up and I'm getting older too. And so like, I don't know, like that's kind of what I want. Like, I'm coming back to what I said at the beginning, where it's like, I just want something different. And I know we've got more to talk about in this movie, but I feel like a lot of this, it's like, it was done well, but it kind of reminds me of, and I know I've been talking for forever, but with the Star Trek movies, like I was not a big fan of Star Trek 4. After watching the first 3 Star Trek movies, if you had asked me what should the next one be, if I had given you like 1,000 possibilities, I would not have hit on they time travel to the 1980s and kidnap a couple of whales to stop some weird alien cone thing from destroying Earth. I never would have said that. They take a premise that I did not want, and they do a good job with it. Star Trek 4 is a well-made movie that I just happen to not like the premise. And I think this is a well-made movie, but a lot of the stuff here is just stuff that I didn't want, if that makes sense.
No, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and I it's not exactly what I was hoping for. And like I said, like I feel like I've seen a lot of this before and better, but I do think it is expertly made. I like a lot of what is here, and even if it's not, what I want, namely Joker, because Jesus Christ. But I don't know, like I still respect this movie a lot, and it's very clearly made by people who like Batman and are passionate about bringing Batman to the screen. Yeah, I like it.
So let's talk about Joker, because you've kind of hit at it twice.
Please not.
Well, I did not watch the deleted scene. I thought maybe that was going to be.
Yeah, don't.
Okay, but he was in the movie and he's talking. I could barely understand what he said. Like I had my volume turned all the way up, and I think he said something like, man, he really rained on your parade, huh? Like I was kind of expecting him to be like, huh, Mondays, am I right? Like you try to flood the city and Batman saves the day. Man, what can you do? I was really hoping that he would say, like he would come out of the shadows like Samuel L. Jackson and be like, did you think you were the only Batman villain in this city? But no, I didn't catch everything he said, but he just started laughing at one point, and then Riddler started laughing, and I was like, oh, okay, I don't, okay. We've already got, like, we had the Jared Leto Joker, and we had the other We Live in a Society Joker, and I kind of was just hoping we could have like a 10 or 15 year moratorium on Joker. This is the guy who played Druig in the Eternals, right?
Yeah.
Okay, he's okay. He's in it for like a minute and a half. He's fine. It's not his fault, but I don't want
at least it's his voice. I mean, I don't know if it was actually him, but okay.
Oh, okay. I actually, when I had heard that there was a Joker deleted scene before I watched the movie, and then whenever this character is talking to Riddler, and from the lighting was very red. There's a lot of like red lighting in this movie, and so I thought, is this Two-Face? Like he kind of looked like the '90s animated Two-Face, like where Two-Face's hair is all messed up and like his face is just really jacked up. And I thought, oh, is this Two-Face? I thought this was supposed to be Joker, and then he starts laughing, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's Joker. Yeah, we have just gotten so much Joker in the last 5 years, and I one thing you mentioned how Batman Begins is more of a character piece, and like yes, I love the villains in that movie, but what was great going into Begins, especially for me since I was not a big Batman reader at the time, what was great about that movie was I didn't really know a lot about Scarecrow. I definitely didn't know a lot about Ra's al Ghul. I remembered him from the cartoon, but when I would see him in the cartoon, I would say, oh, there's that guy who kind of looks like Vincent Price. And I didn't know much about the villains in Begins going into it. I knew there's like Joker, Penguin, Poison Ivy, Riddler. Like I knew the villains who were in the '60s movie and the previous movies. And now we are getting to a point where we're reusing villains we've seen before. And when I was thinking, I saw someone online saying like, if they were to do a sequel to this and use villains we haven't seen before, who would you like to see? And I thought about it and I realized they pretty much used all the villains that I would want to see. And now it's like, what you have left is like Professor Pig and the Court of Owls. And I don't really want to see the Court of Owls. I don't really find them interesting. They're basically just a bunch of businessmen in weird masks. And like, I don't really know what they're about. And I'm afraid they're going to do the Court of Owls, and they'll probably do Joker, and they'll probably do, they'll have Penguin be back, but he won't be the villain. And so I don't think we're ever going to get a movie like Batman Begins where you can kind of give people something they've never seen before. Or if they do, it's going to be something I'm not interested in, because a lot of the villains that have been introduced in the last 20 years are villains that I just don't like. I don't think the story Hush is very good. And I think you would have to significantly reinvent the character and the backstory to make Hush interesting, which they have kind of maybe done a backdoor pilot for Hush in this movie. But, I don't know. Like I don't want to see Joker again.
mean, I also am like burnt out on Joker. Like, he's a great villain, but 3 different versions in like 6 years or something. Like, oh my god.
You know how we're getting multiverse stuff all over the place with Marvel, and DC is maybe going to do a Flash movie if Ezra Miller can stop getting himself arrested. But it's happened like 5 times. I would love to see, like, you know how you were saying, like, the big twist is that Carmine Falcone is a gangster. I'd love to see, like, Robert Pattinson, like, in a room with, like, Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton and Christian Bale, and they're all like, oh, it took you that long? Like, yeah, he's a bad guy. And then, like, all the Jokers are like, we all live in a society, don't we? Not just in this reality, but every reality. No,
Yeah.
if you're listening, DC, please don't do that.
I mean, maybe we already have it.
I don't know. I mean, we are maybe going to get the Flashpoint movie, and I know that's going to do a lot of like multiversal stuff. But at the very least, let's leave Robert Pattinson out of it. That was was one. And I had heard rumors that this was going to be set in the early '90s, but there's like cell phones and like internet stuff. Like this is set in the present day, I think. So I don't know where that rumor came from.
Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to quickly mention something about the Joker scene.
Okay.
So here's my rate on the Joker scene. I was watching a movie, and then that movie turned off, and then for 2 minutes I watched some crap, and then the movie started again. This scene is awful. Like, it's painful. Like, it felt like I was watching a scene out of the new Spider-Man movie. Like, I was shocked, like, at how bad it was. It's like it felt like a fan film, where it's like the movie. But it would have been impossible, right? Because it's like this movie has a distinct look, very shallow depth of field, a specific color palette, and like kind of lighting scheme or whatever. And it felt like somebody had access to their sets or something and was like doing an impression of the movie I just watched. It was weird. It was like, but it was very obviously not the same movie I was watching because it looked horrible. And it's like, I mean, I know they got the guy in makeup. So when I say I know, at least it's his voice, like he's out of focus and in silhouette, and it's just like it looks like a monkey man, and like I like the silhouette looks like an ape, and I'm like I want to see some apes in my DC movies, but I mean, not like this. And then it's like the dialogue is horrible. It's like this god awful dad jokes, and then there's like laughing at each other, and I'm like, oh my, please no more of this. And I was told that like, oh, so there was like that deleted scene that they had shot that was supposed to be earlier in the movie, and like apparently like they cut it, and it's like, okay, but if you cut that scene, this just looks like a Marvel style teaser. But apparently like Matt Reeves has no plans of doing Joker in the next movie. He just wanted to establish that there is a version of the Joker that exists already. But it's like, if you're not going to have both these scenes, don't include either of them.
Yeah.
And I've seen the deleted scene. It's awful. Like, okay. It's one of those things where it's like, I like this movie. I like how it adapts Batman. It's like, I like all of its like interpretation of the material. I just think they're overthinking Joker, where it's like, just make him some guy, right? It's like, but no, he's got like Matt Reeves is talking about, like, he's a guy who like was born with this, you know, skin condition, and like, and like but in this version he's not Joker yet because he hasn't had the accident that turned him into Joker, but he still kind of looks like Joker. It's like, wow, you're overthinking this. Just no, thank you, please. I don't know if you watched early SpongeBob comics, kid, but my favorite tweet was new leak concept art of Joker in the Batman, and it's Pat Tar from like the Neanderthal Patrick from, and it's like with like the extended like gums and sharp teeth and everything. Oh my god, it was so funny. But yeah, no, I hate the Joker scene. However, though, one thing that's sort of interesting, I think largely this movie is very well paced and edited, even though I think it doesn't need to be 3 hours. I think on the whole, like while I'm watching it, I'm with it. But there is like one kind of awkward structural choice, and I think it's because they deleted this Joker scene. So apparently Batman is going to talk to Joker And apparently the scene, as Matt Reeves described it, Batman's at his lowest point. So he is going to not Joker to ask about, like, to try to get into the mind of this serial killer, right? And it's like you watch the scene and it gives you no new information. It's basically just recapping stuff you already know. But this time Joker gets to be there. I think it's in between the scene where Falcone tells him a false backstory about his father, and then Alfred telling him the truth. Because as it plays out, that's like the one really awkward structural choice in the movie, where it's like Batman just looks like a very reactionary character, where it's like he just believes whatever the last thing was told to him was. So like Falcone's like, "Hey, yo, Pops, here's the truth." He's like, "Oh, Alfred, you suck. You lied to me." "No, I didn't. Here's the truth." Oh. It's like the very next scene. Yeah.
And then I guess he goes to Joker and says, "Hey, this is what Alfred said." And then Joker says, No. This is what really happened.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. If he doesn't plan on using the Joker, I don't know why he would have included him at all if he's just going to be in it for like 3 minutes total. And also, like, I agree with you. That sounds way too complicated. Like, just either have him be a guy who, like, you know, puts on the paint like Heath Ledger did, or just have him be a guy who fell in acid and, you know, it bleached his skin. Like, that sounds really weird. But like, I thought for sure that this was like a last minute addition where it's like, okay, we need to, like, oh, this movie, you know, is probably going to do pretty well. Let's go ahead and like shove in a scene kind of like a Marvel teaser for the next movie. And then it seemed to me that he was like, okay, how about Joker talks to Eddie at Arkham? Okay, yeah, let's do that. Like that's how, like, it just seemed like, okay, here they are. They're reacting to Batman is Hope now. It felt very rushed. So it's curious to me that this was supposed to be in the movie. Like, it was planned, and like there was another Joker scene that was supposed to go along with it.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a reshoot at first. Like I said, like I think it looks bad even. Also that scene, that deleted scene of the Joker also looks bad. Where it's like the one thing where I'm like, Matt Reeves, you kicked booty directing this movie. You did a really good job. Why are these scenes so bad? Like, and I think it's because he's just overthinking Joker, where Joker's never in focus, man. And it's like he's just blurry, like, ooh, what does he look like? And you'll have like his eyeball will be in focus, and it's like a super, super close up, and you know, you'll see like a glimpse, and it's like just show us Joker, man. Like you're really like rolling out the red carpet for a character who quite frankly doesn't need it. So but anyways, I do want to ask you about Catwoman. How did you feel about Catwoman in this movie?
I think she's fine. First of all, I really hate her mask. It's got one giant eye hole, and I want 2 eye holes. That is maybe the weirdest, stupidest complaint I have ever had. But ever since this movie came out, and everyone's been doing like fan art of her, and I've been seeing pictures of her, I've been fixated on this mask with one singular eye hole, and it's driving me insane. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, she has the little.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's because her mask is awful.
Like, yeah, okay. Yeah,
I mean, like, I get what they're doing. It's trying to look like a burglar sack, like she's one of the wet bandits from Home Alone, but it has cat ears. But it's like, I think outside of her stupid mask, they could not have found anybody who looks more like Catwoman. It's like alarming. Like, I guess I never really would have thought of Zoe Kravitz, but it's like, just look at her like head, like the way her forehead curves, the shape and angle of her nose, her angular like chin and jaw, like it's shaped exactly like a comic book drawing of Catwoman. It's like remarkable. Like, and like her body type and her physique looks exactly like Catwoman. Like I couldn't believe they found someone who looks just like a comic book version of the character.
I definitely I was getting a lot of like, it reminds me of the Frank Miller Catwoman, not in the sense that, like, because Frank Miller's Catwoman is a prostitute, but like her, like, especially where she's kind of got this like motherly relationship with Holly in year 1, and here like Selina has kind of a sisterly relationship, like she's looking out for Annika. And I was like, especially like when she takes the wig off, I was like, oh, there's Frank Miller's Catwoman, like very much. But honestly, like I would even be okay with like the toboggan thing where she looks like a cat burglar if it just was 2 eye holes instead of one. I can't like. I sound like such a weird, like a weirdo, but I don't know why that bothered me. It just looks weird. But I would have even been okay with her not having a mask.
No, that's what they should have done. Yeah, yeah.
Like I remember people complaining when Anne Hathaway, she has the goggles and then like she flips them up and so it kind of looks like cat ears, and like people were saying like, oh, we get it, haha, cat mask. And like I would have been okay with like, you know, just a cat suit. Like when you're a cat burglar and you have to expect that when you, and she's not even a cat burglar really, she's like stealing from the mob, but she's not a trained cat burglar who goes and, you know, is stealing like a diamond from the 1%. But like, you know, you could just say like she has a cat suit to like, so that if you're wearing baggy clothes and it might get like caught on a nail or something on the wall when you're running away, like that's why she wears a cat suit. Okay, fine. But yeah,
I think the reason why the mask looks so dumb is because like her costume looks like Catwoman's costume. It's like this high end, like really like, you know, like black leather, like tactical, like suit. And then it's like she just has like she really ran out of a budget for a mask, guys. And it's like she already barely wears the mask anyways. So it's like, why did you give her such a dumb mask? Whatever. I don't know.
But two of my coworkers, actually 3 of my coworkers saw this before I did, and one of them, she said it was her favorite Batman movie. She had already seen it 3 times. The other 2 said they liked it okay. I think they liked it less than I did, but like both of them were like thinking like Zoe Kravitz is here because she's like a famous, like she's related to Lenny Kravitz, and I don't know if I would go that far. I think, I mean, like I said, you could probably cut Penguin from the movie. I don't know if you could cut Catwoman. Like it'd be kind of like, you know, it's good to have someone who's in, like, especially since this movie is about like Batman finding his place in the city, and like, you know, Riddler is mad that like Bruce Wayne got all the attention, and it's like the whole thing is about like his place in this civilization where he's you know, he's up in his tower and like she is down in the trenches, and you have to have her there to be a representative of that dynamic. And so I kind of like what they did here. Like I said earlier, I do think that they're kind of pulling from the Nolan idea of like she says, hey, you know, come with me, don't be a hero, and he's like, no, I'm going to be a hero. Like that felt very Nolan. And I'm also I've said before, I don't like the idea of Batman ending up with anyone. I really hate the idea of him having a happy ending with Selina. I have always said Batman is married to his job, and his job is protecting Gotham. And so I kind of like at the end where she says, hey, you know, let's go. I think she said, let's go kill some people, or she said something like knock some people off or something like that. And I'm glad he was like, no, I'm going to stay here in Gotham. That felt very true to the Batman that I know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like the Catwoman stuff in here. It's a pretty standard Batman and Catwoman dynamic. But, you know, because I'm me and, you know, I can't be satisfied with anything. I guess like it's one of those things where like everything in this movie, like I like it. It's just like not the best version of this. So it's like and I think a lot of it actually comes down to Matt Reeves' style. He has in this movie in particular, he's really leaning into like David Fincher with like the coldness and like the bleakness of everything. That being said, like one of the consequences, the opportunity costs of going for that is if you want to have a Batman Catwoman dynamic, you know, that's obviously laced with a lot of like sex appeal or whatever. I didn't find it sexy at all. And you have to understand, part of my sexual awakening was 1960s Catwoman. So like, I am your target audience for this. Also, like half of the audience I was with were very clearly women who wanted Robert Pattinson to manhandle them. So, but like, I don't know, like the Batman Catwoman dynamic isn't sexy enough, I don't think. But that being said, like on a narrative level, it is functional, and in like the Nolan film, It does feel like you have Catwoman there to sort of be the placeholder for the marginalized, kind of lower in society thing, where they're like, oh, wow, Batman, you actually do care about the little guy. You're not just some rich person who's living out a fantasy or whatever. Yeah, no, I think she's cool. I'm glad they brought her in. But sorry, what were you gonna say?
So as a somewhat of a counter to your it's not sexy enough, if you remember when we talked about the Timothy Dalton James Bond, was it License to Kill we talked about?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, when we talked about License to Kill, and I said I was like I kind of not quite parody, but like there's that one scene where the redheaded woman is like kind of, she's pressing her body up against James and she's like, how about we work together? And then they start kissing each other and like they're saying like, you'll pay me so much money, and then they're kind of negotiating. And I said what I actually wanted from that scene was she like pushes her body up against him and then she says, how about we work together? And he says for this much, she says deal, and then just like then pulls away and like doesn't kiss him. And this movie kind of does that. There's a scene where she is putting on the contact lenses that record everything they see, and I thought that was a really cool gadget, by the way. Batman, a lot of times his gadget is Batmobile and grappling hook, and or like in the Nolan movies, you have the magic fingerprint thing that a lot of people have talked about that in the past. But I really like the contact lens thing, but she's putting them on, and then he's like, here, look at me. And he kind of like, touches her chin and like tilts her head up. And you think it's going to be like a romantic scene. And then you're like, okay, yeah, it looks good. And he just backs away. And I was like, oh, that's funny. Like, I don't necessarily need, like, I love Batman Begins, but I really hate the scene where Batman is running from the GCPD and they're like, he's flying on rooftops.
That seems great. What do you mean?
I don't know. That never worked for me. And like the part where he says like, just tell me what it looks like, and then he sees it, he's like, never mind. I don't know. Like that was my least favorite part. But in this movie, like when Batman hits the ground, I'm laughing, and when Batman doesn't kiss Selina, I'm laughing, and I'm also like, as someone who doesn't believe in romantic love, like whenever I see characters kiss, I'm usually saying, why are you doing that? Like, why are you pushing your food holes together? Like at the end of Man of Steel, I was like, this should have taken like another film for this relationship to like get to this point. And like here, like she kisses him at about the halfway point, and I was thinking, well, first of all, you don't know how hot he is under that cowl. He could take it off and he can look just disgusting. But also I was like, you two have like been together, and like the last time you guys talked, you were like yelling at him and taking off the contact lenses, and then like she comes and kisses him, and I don't know, I feel like if this was like the third or like fourth movie where these two are like teaming up to like under like weird circumstances, like an enemy and my enemy thing, I could see them like becoming a thing, but it almost felt rushed to me.
Okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to cover on this? Because I'm kind of thinking about this movie, and I don't know if I have too much else to say. I guess we haven't really talked about the ending, but I feel like the final few like 20-30 minutes, like plot wise, I kind of get a little disinterested, but I think character wise, I think it's really, really good.
Okay. I have a few other things. I'll try to speed this up. It feels like we've been talking for a while. We've complained about how long the movie is. I think our podcast is going to be longer than the movie. Now, I was mentioning how like there were things that reminded me of the Nolan films, and like I remember people complaining about how like the Joker's plan is like so precisely planned out, and you have to ask like, how does he know that this is all going to happen exactly the way he plans it? And I was also thinking like at one point Riddler shoots Carmine Falcone and then climbs down a fire escape, and then somebody sees him and they call the police and they say, hey, we saw a guy climbing out the fire escape, and then they catch him at the diner, and then that's all part of his plan. And also, can we put a moratorium on villains who get captured and that's all part of their plan? And like I don't know, that's something that like I feel like that was done in the Avengers, that was done with the Joker, that was done in Skyfall. Like let's put a stop to that. But I was thinking to myself, what if somebody didn't see him climb out the fire escape, or
this is Gotham. What if she saw someone climb out the fire escape and said, I'm going to mind my P's and Q's. I'm not going to call the cops. Or, like, what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of moments where it's like, how did he know this was going to happen? And how did he plan it so perfectly? But that's a minor thing. Also, at the end, when Catwoman is trying to get out of the city, and she says, "Come on, I'm just trying to get out of the city," and he's like, "No, you have to go in the football stadium. Everyone in the city needs to go in there. Like, there's bombs going off." I was thinking, yeah, shouldn't that be a good reason why you should let her get out of the city? Like, if there's like 13 bombs going off in the city, I would think people trying to get out, you should let them get out, because it's safer outside of the city where there's not bombs going off. But for some reason, because the plot needs her to be in the football stadium to save Bruce, the police are like, no, everybody who's trying to escape the city needs to instead go in the football stadium where it's probably more dangerous. And I did think that was a little weird. That kind of felt like something I also would have seen in a Nolan movie, like where like all the police in Gotham City go underground to catch Bane's people instead of like, some of them, what I'm saying? Like, that kind of felt like that to me. And also, I'm really glad that this movie kind of said that the I Am Vengeance is kind of silly, because I love Batman the Animated Series. I hate when I was a kid, they would advertise that cartoon with "I am vengeance, I am the night, I am Batman," and I've always hated that line because I do not like the idea of Batman being a creature of vengeance. And this movie, he's not specifically looking for the people who killed his parents. Like, we say that like Alfred is like they're kind of talking about it, but he's not actively looking for Joe Chill or whoever. But I like by the end that he says, "Oh, like, this is bad. I need to be hope instead of vengeance." And maybe it's a little heavy-handed, but I like that we're saying, hey, Batman is vengeance is kind of awful. And no, I don't know. I've never liked the vengeance thing. So I'm glad that this movie plays with that and then does not do it.
Yeah. No, I and it's all kind of about why being simply a tool of vengeance is destructive. Yeah, I think that one of the things I like about kind of towards the end of the movie is kind of the clever way in which we do villain hench people. Like, the villain's already been captured. Riddler thought Bruce Wayne was actually on his side, or thought Batman was on his side, because he's only been acting as an instrument of vengeance. Riddler is also simply acting as an instrument of vengeance that is inspired by Batman. Cool. Like that all. And because he's like a social media influencer, his followers all show up wearing the same costume, and that's how we do the whole villain having henchmen thing. I think that's really cool. So I really like the there's a recurring motif that kind of him standing as a symbol of hope doesn't exactly come out of nowhere. So the opening scene is Riddler murders the mayor, right? And then there's sort of like this recurring thing that we get, like a motif where Batman notices the mayor's grieving son, and then later when he goes to the funeral, at the funeral you have the son is there, and Bruce wants to kind of comfort and maybe talk to the kid, but then gets interrupted. And then at the end, what's really cool, so like here's what I kind of take from that. You have Bruce seeing like a kindred spirit there, right? Like, I am that boy because my parents were also killed. Like, he only lost his dad, but like, I know what that loss feels like. And you have this whole movie where he's sort of rejecting being Bruce Wayne and only embracing being Batman, and sort of visualizing him kind of embracing hope, and like kind of this will sort of signify that moving on, he will embrace Bruce Wayne. Is that at the end, when he finally decides to embrace hope, he sees that boy kind of hiding, under the rubble, and he like extends his hand to that boy, and that boy takes his hand, and in embracing that child, he's embracing Bruce Wayne. And I like that a lot. Yeah,
that was I didn't really pick up on all like the as deep of a thematic thing as you just kind of laid out, but I definitely liked how he saw himself in the boy, and that's one thing. Like, you could probably have 10,000 stories where if a little kid loses their parents and Batman feels like personally responsible for that. Like I will always eat that with a spoon. Like, you know, I feel like that's really good, like bread and butter of Batman. So I kind of like that.
I know there is a fan theory rolling around right now that kid will become Robin, because in the opening shot, it's sort of like you see him, you can see that he's like trained in like karate or something. He's like, before Riddler breaks into the mayor's house to kill him, it looks like his son is being taken away to some kind of like jujitsu or like martial arts practice or something.
Okay, I saw somebody like, I didn't really know what was going on there. I saw somebody in like a red ninja costume, and I thought this was just like their butler like pretending to be a ninja and like you know, like seriously like messing around with a kid, like haha villain, you know, like and then it's like, okay, you guys go on, do your trick or treating, and like, you know what I'm saying, like I didn't really know what was going on there. Like I saw someone.
Shoot, right, that it is Halloween night. He's probably dressing up as a ninja for. You know what? Forget I said anything.
But was that the kid in the ninja costume, or was that someone else?
I think that was the kid in the ninja costume.
Okay, because I really, when I first saw that scene, I was like, what is going on here? Is this like I don't know if the DC universe has like a version of like the Hand, but I was like, is this like, is Batman going to be fighting, or I guess like the Demon's Head, like Ra's al Ghul? I was like, oh, are we doing this again? Because I knew the Riddler was going to be in the movie, but yeah, I don't know if I want the kid to be Robin. I kind of like him as just like Bruce Wayne sees himself in him, but his mom is still alive. And I know like Tim Drake in the comics, his dad and his stepmom were alive, and he was kind of having to balance his home life with also being Robin. But I feel like I would just rather the kid be a full-blown orphan and be Robin. I don't know how they would do him being Robin with his mom still being alive.
Yeah. And they might just do the Dark Knight Rises thing where it's like a conglomerate of different hodgepodge of ideas.
That could be, yeah.
One. One thing I kind of liked that they did with Riddler conceptually is they turned him into a horror movie villain. Like they straight up just do a scene out of Halloween where like Hector Hammond gets inside of like his car and there's like perspiration on the windows because he's in there breathing. That's cool. That scene at the funeral where Batman gets into a Twitch debate with the Riddler. That was a cool scene, and I like how when that actor dies, when he blows up, again, he died for the knowledge that a gangster is a gangster. Just want to throw that one out there. But I like how when he dies, he just like, it almost was like a David Lynch effect where it's just like a fireball shoots out of the ground. You don't see like arms flying in different directions and like all that stuff. It's just kind of this cool like flame effect. It's really cool. But that being said, once again, because I'm an unsatisfiable jerk, that scene was like good. And it's like, as it's playing out, I'm like, yes, this is a good idea for a scene. I'm like 80% of the way there though, where it's like, I understand the scene. I understand that it's well made. I understand how it's supposed to be affecting me, but I'm not on the edge of my seat and fully immersed in the tension of it. And that's how I think that's a good way of kind of describing a lot of the scenes in this movie.
Yeah. And maybe this isn't exactly where you're coming from, but I wonder if, and I kind of said this earlier, I wonder if part of it is like, we've gotten good Batman before. Like, you know, for me, The Dark Knight Rises doesn't seem that long ago. I watched it and The Dark Knight in theaters. Like, it doesn't seem that long ago that I watched those movies. And so, like, when we get this, which, again, like, channeling your brother, like, it feels like they're kind of just redirecting a lot of what Nolan did in those and putting it in a slightly new context. Like, the best I can say is, like, yeah, it's fine, but it's not blowing me away.
No, I get that.
I think that's about all I had to say. Overall, like, when I was watching it, even though I probably sound very, like, cold towards this movie, of the recent outcrop of DC stuff over the last, like, 10 years, this is one of the better movies, I would say. And I'm not going to rush to, you know, buy it as soon as it hits physical release, but I wouldn't mind owning this. So I know that's faint praise, but I liked it more than a lot of the recent DC movies. I'll say that.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you're not going to agree with this, but I prefer the Suicide Squad myself. Okay. I mean, I look, for someone who liked the Suicide Squad as much as I did, I am shook at how bad I thought the Peacemaker show was. Just so bad. So this is better than that. And I'm honestly more excited at this point to see a sequel to The Batman than I am to The Suicide Squad, just because Peacemaker really killed my enthusiasm in that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a single episode. There's so much content out there right now that I'm kind of taking the option of how about I watch none of it. Since I can't watch all of it, I won't watch any of it. Because there's so much stuff that I'm like, I still haven't finished The Mandalorian season 2. And that was like I was into that, and then I stopped to do some other stuff, and now I'm like, I need to get back into that. But yeah, that's about all we have to say. I know this has been 100 hours long. Connor, any final thoughts?
I'm sure I'll think of something. I'll probably put it in the comments below if I do remember it. What do you want to talk about next? Do we finally want to rip the Band-Aid off of Spider-Man and I can make everyone hate me all over again because that movie sucks?
Yeah, I guess we can. With how much you've been talking about how much you love it, I've been like dreading watching it. But yeah, we could probably talk about that next.
Well, here's the thing. Everyone loves it, so I'm not saying you will love it, but you will most certainly like it more than I do.
Okay.
And if you like it even a modicum more than I do, it'll make for an interesting discussion. I'm very curious to know where people who like it are coming from. And I'm sure they have plenty of reasons. The reason I keep hearing people say is, well, it's fun. And that's it. And I mean, I don't need you to like stop what you're doing to give me a dissertation, but it would be nice to engage in a conversation where someone says more than just it's fun. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I have some shopping I got to go do. Bye. So I don't know.
Okay. Well, then we will talk about that next. In the meantime, I am once again Vengeance. No, I'm Hope. Sorry, I'm Hope.
And now I'm Vengeance.
And we will see you guys next time. Bye.